A ceasefire was announced 88 minutes before the deadline. The world celebrated. Oil dropped 16% overnight. Stock markets in Tokyo surged 5.4%. S&P futures climbed. And less than 24 hours later, the Strait of Hormuz was closed again. Welcome to the morning after. This is April 9th, 2026, day 41 of the war, or day 1 of the ceasefire, depending on who you ask. Because right now, both of those things are simultaneously true. And understanding how that is possible tells you everything about what this fragile truce actually is, and what it is not. Let us start from the moment the deal was announced, because the timeline of its collapse is as instructive as the deal itself. At approximately 6 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, April 7th, 88 minutes before Trump's self-imposed deadline, the president posted on Truth Social that he had agreed to suspend attacks on Iran for 2 weeks. The decision, he wrote, was made following conversations with Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Pakistan's military chief, Field Marshal Asim Munir, who had requested he hold off. The condition was a complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi confirmed acceptance shortly after. The war that had been burning for 40 days had a pause. The reaction was instant and global. Oil fell as much as 16%. Asian markets surged. European leaders released statements of relief. The UN Secretary-General called for all parties to abide by the terms. China, which had quietly been working the diplomatic backchannels, welcomed the deal publicly. Pakistan was hailed as the indispensable broker. Trump declared it a total and complete victory, 100%, no question about it. Iran's Supreme National Security Council said it had forced the United States to accept its 10-point plan and described the outcome as an enduring defeat for Washington. Both sides declared victory, which is the first sign that nobody actually agreed on the same thing. Here is the problem, and it is structural rather than procedural. The ceasefire has 3 core terms as the U.S. understands them. First, a complete reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Second, a 2-week period for negotiations toward a permanent agreement. Third, a halt to U.S. and Israeli military operations against Iran. Lebanon, the U.S. and Israel insist, is not included. That is between Israel and Hezbollah, a separate conflict. Iran understands the ceasefire differently. Pakistan's Prime Minister Sharif, who brokered the deal, announced explicitly that it was effective immediately everywhere, including Lebanon. Iran's 10-point proposal, which Trump called a workable basis for negotiations, includes as its 10th point a full cessation of combat on all fronts, including against Hezbollah. Iran's Foreign Minister Araghchi posted publicly, "The U.S. must choose ceasefire or continued war via Israel. It cannot have both." These are not nuanced differences of interpretation. They are 2 completely incompatible understandings of what was agreed to, emerging within hours of the same announcement. And then Israel made the choice for everyone. On Wednesday, April 8th, within hours of the ceasefire announcement, Israel launched what the IDF described as the largest coordinated strikes on Lebanon since the conflict began. In the span of 10 minutes, more than 100 sites were targeted across Beirut, the Bekaa Valley, and southern Lebanon. Lebanon's health ministry reported at least 182 people killed, the highest single-day death toll of the Israel-Hezbollah war. The Arab League chief accused Israel of, quote, persistently seeking to sabotage the ceasefire deal. France, Australia, and several other countries said Lebanon must be included. The UN human rights chief said the carnage, quote, defies belief. Iran responded immediately by closing the Strait of Hormuz again. A handful of tankers had been allowed to pass in the brief window. 2 oil ships made it through before Iran halted all traffic, citing Israeli ceasefire violations. Iran's state media declared a, quote, complete closure. The White House called it, quote, completely unacceptable. Caroline Leavitt said Trump's, quote, expectation and demand was that the channel be reopened. JD Vance, who is expected to lead the U.S. delegation to Islamabad talks tomorrow, said Israel might need to, quote, check themselves a little bit in Lebanon to keep the deal alive. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs said the strait had reopened. Iran said it had not. By nightfall on day one of the ceasefire, Kuwait reported 28 Iranian drone attacks. The UAE reported 35. Saudi Arabia intercepted 9 drones. An oil refinery on Iran's Lebanon island was struck. Iran's military announced it maintains strategic control and management of the strait, regardless of any agreement. And ships attempting to use the waterway were directed by Iranian authorities to avoid the main traffic lane due to potential naval mines. That is not a ceasefire. That is a hot war with a press release stapled to it. Now here is the analytical question that matters. Is this a ceasefire that is breaking down? Or was it never really a ceasefire to begin with? The answer is somewhere between the two, and the distinction matters for what comes next. Trump needed an exit. This is the clear-eyed assessment of analyst Trita Parsi, who noted that the sense of urgency was more pronounced on the U.S. side. After 40 days of war, with oil at $116, gasoline above $4, munition stocks depleted, congressional Democrats pushing a war powers resolution, dozens calling for the 25th Amendment, and a first American combat aircraft shot down, the administration needed a way out that did not look like a retreat. The Pakistani brokered pause gave them that, a 2-week window to negotiate something they can call a win. Iran, meanwhile, had its own reasons to accept a pause. The country's industrial base has been severely damaged. More than 1,900 Iranians have been killed, according to official figures, with human rights groups citing numbers closer to 32,000. Its new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, has not yet appeared in public. The IRGC is consolidating power and needs breathing room. But Iran also knows it holds the strongest remaining card, the Strait. Every day it stays closed, the economic pressure on Washington grows. The ceasefire does not require Iran to give that card up permanently. It only requires a temporary opening. Iran gets a pause from bombing, time to regroup, and the possibility of formalizing a transit toll that would generate revenue indefinitely. Both sides got something. Neither side gave up anything fundamental. That is what a deal between adversaries who don't trust each other looks like. It is not peace. It is a managed pause with divergent exit strategies. The Lebanon variable is the live wire in all of this. Netanyahu has been clear from the start. The ceasefire does not cover Hezbollah. His logic is that Hezbollah is Iran's proxy, but not Iran, a separate actor operating in a separate theater. That argument is legally and structurally defensible. It is also, strategically, an arrangement of enormous convenience for Israel, which was already pursuing a ground invasion of southern Lebanon with the goal of establishing what it calls a security zone south of the Litani River. Iran sees it differently. Hezbollah is not a proxy in Iran's framing. It is a resistance front that has been fighting alongside Iran for decades and whose commanders report to Tehran. Allowing Israel to dismantle Hezbollah while Iran is bound by a ceasefire with the U.S. is, from Tehran's perspective, allowing the U.S. to use a pause in one front to enable a campaign on another. The IRGC's newly appointed military advisor, Mohsen Rezai, who commanded the Revolutionary Guard for 16 years, posted publicly, "We stand with all our might alongside the Hezbollah Mujahideen." The Lebanon question is the one issue that could collapse the Islamabad talks before they start, and it is the one issue that neither the U.S. nor Iran has the power to resolve on their own, because the actor who needs to make the key decision, Netanyahu, is not a party to the ceasefire framework and has shown no inclination to stop. Iran's foreign minister put the equation plainly. The U.S. must choose between ceasefire and continued war via Israel. That framing gives Washington an impossible task. It cannot order Israel to halt operations in Lebanon without fracturing the relationship that has defined U.S. Middle East policy for decades. And it cannot allow Israel to continue while expecting Iran to keep the strait open. That is the trap the ceasefire has created, and it has less than 13 days to resolve it. Tomorrow morning local time in Islamabad, the U.S. delegation is scheduled to arrive. JD Vance will lead it, alongside Steve Witkoff and JD Kushner, who holds no official government role but whose involvement signals the personal deal-making style Trump favors. Islamabad has been shut down. Schools and government offices closed for 2 days. Extraordinary security deployed following March protests in which Karachi saw a storming of the U.S. consulate that killed 12 people. The talks tomorrow are not a negotiation toward a final deal. They are a negotiation about whether a negotiation is possible. The gap between the U.S. 15-point plan and Iran's 10-point proposal remains enormous. The U.S. insists there will be no uranium enrichment in Iran. Iran's 10-point plan implicitly accepts a right to enrich. Trump said at his press conference, "There will be no enrichment of uranium." Karachi has not confirmed this condition. One unnamed White House official told the New York Times that the terms Trump agreed to as the basis for Friday's negotiations differed materially from the plan Iran has made public. JD Vance himself called it a fragile truce and said it had taught him a lot about Iran. That is the rare moment of clarity in a week of competing narratives. Fragile is the operative word. What the next 13 days require is not just two parties agreeing on nuclear enrichment, sanctions, reparations, missile programs, proxy networks, and the Strait of Hormuz. It requires all of that, while Israel simultaneously prosecutes a ground war in Lebanon that Iran insists violates the deal. The ceasefire that the world celebrated 24 hours ago is real. The war it was supposed to pause is also still real. And the question of which one survives the next 2 weeks is now entirely dependent on what happens in a city that has never before hosted a negotiation this consequential, Islamabad, beginning tomorrow morning. The chessboard has not been reset. The pieces are just briefly not moving. Watch what happens when they do. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps more people find the board. We will be back tomorrow.